In the last episode, Jin-Woo and the Ant King clashed in an epic battle. Jin-Woo finally wins the fight, but after the battle, as he approaches Miss Cha to heal her, he finds himself unable to do so. Now, the next episode begins. Jin-Woo, however, is focused on saving the one life still remaining. His eyes turn to Miss Cha. On his final attempt, Jin-Woo once again says, "Arise." This time, the shadows envelop Byung-goo's body successfully. Yoon-ho grabs Jin-Woo's shoulder in shock and asks, "What did he do to Byung-goo?" His voice filled with disbelief, asking further, "Does he have the power to command the dead?" At last, Jin-Woo's third attempt is successful. Byung-goo's hand emerges from the ground as the shadows solidify around him. Byung-goo, now a shadow, standing tall beside Jin-Woo. Yoon-ho stands in disbelief, questioning whether Jin-Woo possesses the power to command the dead. Jong-in inquires if he can harness the abilities of the deceased, while Dong-wook remarks that he is no ordinary summoner. Byung-goo approaches Hai-in and activates his skill, beginning to heal her. Yoon-ho, watching the scene unfold, asks if he is truly healing her. Jin-Woo observes Byung-goo and states that he can discern the kind of person he was. Despite having received no orders, Byung-goo instinctively started healing Hai-in, demonstrating a warm heart. Yoon-ho grits his teeth and asserts that the entity before them is no longer Byung-goo, to which Jin-Woo agrees. Meanwhile, the cameraman, overwhelmed by shock, finally understands why Jin-Woo had instructed him to turn off the camera. He now realizes the terrifying truth that Jin-Woo can summon the dead. Jong-in reflects on the battle, noting that as the conflict escalates, Jin-Woo only grows stronger, becoming truly formidable. Yoon-ho, turning to Jin-Woo, acknowledges that he will inevitably partake in future battles and admits that Byung-goo's healing abilities would be invaluable. However, he reveals that Byung-goo despised violence and pleads with Jin-Woo not to make him fight again. Jin-Woo remains silent for a moment before brushing Yoon-ho's hand off his shoulder. He reminds Yoon-ho that this is the second time he has placed his hand on his shoulder, but there is one difference. This time, it is not an order, but a heartfelt request. After a brief pause, Jin-Woo expresses his agreement with Yoon-ho's words and proceeds to terminate Byung-goo's extraction. As Byung-goo's form begins to dissipate, he smiles, and Yoon-ho does the same before expressing his gratitude. Outside, a helicopter arrives, and a soldier informs them that the hunters have arrived. Yoon-ho, expecting Jin-Woo to join them, is confused when Jin-Woo declares that he will remain behind. Jin-Woo explains that he has unfinished business to take care of, which Yoon-ho understands, recognizing that the raid is far from over. Jin-Woo assures them that he will eliminate the remaining ants. Summoning Kaisel, he ascends into the sky and disappears into the distance. Meanwhile, aboard the Japanese hunter's ship, Minoru, still paralyzed with fear, frantically recounts the sheer strength of the monstrous ant, emphasizing that they could never defeat such a being. He insists that they failed to grasp the magnitude of the threat, since they did not witness how it effortlessly slaughtered Goto. Despairing, he declares that the raid has failed, and that no hunter in existence could possibly slay the beast. Sugimoto, attempting to reassure him, tells him to calm down, revealing that the raid has already concluded and the beast has been defeated. Minoru, struggling to believe it, listens as Sugimoto explains that they received confirmation from the Korean headquarters. Though skeptical, he understands that such an announcement must be true. Sugimoto recalls his earlier conversation with Goto, where the latter had mentioned Jin-Woo. At that moment, a soldier informs him that the ants are dispersing, and he is shocked to learn that some still remain. Without hesitation, he orders the ships to prepare for battle. Elsewhere, a large-scale battle rages between the Shadow Army and the remaining ants. Jin-Woo, amid the chaos, notes that he is gaining experience even for eliminating unhatched ants, considering it an added bonus. Opening his inventory, he realizes that he needs to reorganize his items. As he rummages through, he suddenly notices something. His gaze falls upon a massive sword. He had completely forgotten about it. Taking the sword out, he contemplates wielding it. Swinging it experimentally, he is stunned by its overwhelming power. Deciding that it would be a waste to keep it stored away, he considers using it to exterminate the remaining ant eggs. Meanwhile, in a luxurious mansion, Connor stands before David, the head of the Hunter's Bureau, inquires about his thoughts. David, having just finished watching the footage, remarks that he lost track of time. It is already 4 in the morning. He states that he already knows his answer and acknowledges that Connor came to his house at such an hour for precisely this reason. Connor continues, marveling at the fact that Jin-Woo is a hunter capable of summoning and commanding 100 beasts. He asserts that such talent would be wasted in Korea, a country too small for him. The anime may be ending, but the journey isn't over. I'll continue uploading arcs of solo leveling per week, so make sure to subscribe and be the first to watch. David agrees, but asks if Connor has obtained any additional information about him. Handing him a file, Connor reveals its contents. Details regarding an explosion at the Bureau several months prior, an incident known as the Sung Il-hwan case. According to the file, Sung Il-hwan had been captured alive within an A-rank dungeon off the East Coast by another A-rank hunter. Initially, they were uncertain whether he was a beast or a human, but he claimed to be a hunter from South Korea. The Bureau had gathered extensive data on him, and all relevant information remained documented in the file. More importantly, it is revealed that Sung Il-hwan is none other than Jin-Woo's father. Recognizing the significance of this revelation, Connor asserts that they now have an opportunity. No other country is aware of this information. However, he admits that they cannot handle this situation the same way they did with Dong-soo. David, his expression turning cold, reminds Connor that South Korea has been a long-standing ally of the United States. Taking another S-rank hunter from them would be a direct affront to their alliance. Connor, unwavering, insists that Jin-Woo is worth the risk. David narrows his eyes and demands to know if he truly believes he can accomplish this. Connor, undeterred, confidently replies that he will give it his utmost effort. Back on the battlefield, Jin-Woo levels up once again, finally reaching level 100. Letting out a sigh of relief, he acknowledges that this particular battle was unusually troublesome. With his mind now free to focus, he retrieves the Ant King's corpse and attempts a shadow extraction. Suddenly, an immense pressure envelops him. The world around him plunges into darkness. Perplexed, he wonders what is happening. Was this reaction triggered by his attempt to extract its shadow, or had he failed? Just as he begins to question the outcome, the oppressive darkness lifts, and he finds himself staring at the new shadow. Towering before him, it radiates an overwhelming presence. Jin-Woo had believed the extraction had failed, but the creature standing before him is proof to the contrary. The Ant King's shadow has successfully manifested more than that. It is of general rank. The Ant King's shadow stands before Jin-Woo, unlike anything he has encountered before. Up until now, the highest ranks he had seen among his shadows were Standard, Elite, Knight, and Elite Knight. But this one surpasses them all. If his assumption is correct, then this shadow is far stronger than any he has extracted so far, which is unsurprising given how powerful the Ant King had been in life. Shifting his attention to the Queen's corpse, he prepares to extract her shadow, but before he can proceed, the Ant King kneels before him, addressing him as king and requesting a name. Jin-Woo considers whether the absolute loyalty that binds all his soldiers extends to this one as well. A question lingers in his mind. How is this shadow capable of speech? The Ant King replies that he has always possessed the ability. Confused, Jin-Woo wonders if he means that he could speak even before becoming a shadow. He recalls that Iron had once been human, yet after becoming a shadow, he had been unable to speak. The same was true for Byung-gu and Tusk. The only clear distinction between them and the Ant King is their rank, which raises another question. Will others also gain the ability to speak once they ascend to a higher rank? Testing the Ant King's devotion, Jin-Woo reveals that he was the one who killed him and asks if he still wishes to follow him. The Ant King, however, does not perceive it that way. He insists that he was not killed by Jin-Woo, but rather reborn through his power. Overwhelmed by joy, he pledges eternal allegiance, kneeling once more in complete devotion. Again, he requests a name. Jin-Woo briefly contemplates what to call him. Naming him something simple like Ant or Bug would be odd. He should have a name that sets him apart. At that moment, he remembers the name of the author who wrote The Ants. Without hesitation, he speaks the name Beru. Beru expresses his gratitude with evident joy, but Jin-Woo quickly turns back to the Queen's corpse and extracts her shadow. The process is successful, yet something unexpected occurs. All the ants in the area begin to behave differently. Puzzled, Jin-Woo realizes that his bond with them has weakened. Seeking an explanation, he looks to Beru. Beru clarifies that the Queen possesses an inherent ability to rule her colony, which remains intact even in death. As long as she exists, she retains the right to command the ants. When Jin-Woo asks for confirmation, Beru affirms his statement. Noticing that the queen's mana is surprisingly low for someone of her rank, Jin-Woo demands an explanation. Beru explains that her mana was primarily used for reproduction, and now that she no longer has a physical body, that function has ceased, leaving her with significantly depleted reserves. With this revelation, Jin-Woo considers her worth as a combatant. If she is incapable of battle, then there is no reason to keep her. He remains silent for a moment before making his decision. Without hesitation, he terminates her shadow. Turning his attention to his soldiers, he orders them to stop collecting the essence stones, stating that all of them will be used for the reconstruction of Jeju Island. Without question, they obey, dropping the stones immediately. He instructs them not to keep even a single one for themselves. Gazing at the stone recovered from Beru's corpse, he concludes that it will be more than sufficient for his own needs. With that matter settled, he shifts his focus to the remaining ants. The pressing question is whether his current troops are sufficient to eliminate them all. Determined, he declares that they will fight with everything they have. Beru steps forward, analyzing the battlefield. He observes that the enemy forces are struggling to navigate in the absence of a leader. Without proper coordination, they are incapable of maintaining formation and are scattering in disarray. When Jin-Woo asks how many ants remain, Beru responds without hesitation. Before the attack, there had been approximately 8,700 ants. Now, about 4,000 remain. Jin-Woo exhales sharply. He had assumed that the earlier battle had thinned their numbers more significantly, but it seems there are still many left to eliminate. Considering his options, he questions whether Beru can handle the remainder on his own. Without hesitation, Beru states that he will carry out the task if given the order. Meanwhile, aboard the ship, Jong-soo warns the crew that the ants are approaching. Immediately, the ships respond, launching a barrage of missiles while mages unleash their magic. The sky erupts with explosions, casting an eerie glow over the stormy battlefield. Gina reports that the ants are changing course, heading north toward the Knights Guild. Ki-hoon quickly rallies the Hunters Guild, instructing them to prepare for battle. The confrontation is inevitable. At the same time, the Vice Guild leader of the Fame Guild commands her subordinates to ready themselves. A member of the Fiend Guild berates his comrades, reminding them of the sheer strength of a single ant. If they wish to reclaim the Fiend Guild's former glory, they must stand their ground and fight. However, fear takes hold of some. Min Sung, trembling, questions how they are supposed to fight such creatures. Another guild member sneers, remarking that despite being an A-rank hunter, Min Sung is nothing more than a coward. The rain continues to pour relentlessly as the ants emerge in the distance. Jo-hee watches their rapid approach with growing unease, questioning whether they truly have the strength to withstand the attack. The ants move with terrifying speed. Within moments, they are already within arm's reach. Suddenly, Chi-yul's eyes widen in shock as he witnesses an ant being slashed apart in an instant. Jo-hee stands frozen, struggling to comprehend what had just happened. She murmurs in disbelief, unable to process the scene before her. Chi-yul, still reeling, mutters that whatever struck down the ant was impossibly fast, so fast that he hadn't even seen it move. Only then does the truth become clear. The figure standing amidst the carnage is none other than Beru. The efforts to exterminate the ants continue for 2 days in the southern regions of Korea. At the same time, reports emerge of ants being spotted near Chinese waters, a revelation that seems almost unbelievable. The idea that the ants could have flown all the way to China is staggering. Off the coast of China, aboard a ship, the crew struggles with exhaustion, having been unable to sleep for 2 days. The tension remains high as a soldier informs the captain that the second wave of ants is now within shooting range, awaiting orders to fire. However, the captain stops them, noting that their hero appears eager to handle the situation alone. Standing at the edge of the ship, Liu Jigang observes the endless swarm and comments on their persistence. Without hesitation, he unsheathes his swords, declaring his intent to send every last one of them sinking into the ocean. With a single powerful swing, he releases a devastating shockwave slash, cutting through the incoming ants and reducing them to nothing. Their bodies plummet from the sky, vanishing beneath the waves. Dismissing them as weak and unimpressive, he reflects on how much more challenging the battle would have been if the ants Jin-Woo had once fought were still alive. Finding no real thrill in this encounter, he considers it a shame. Their bodies plummet from the sky, vanishing beneath the waves. Meanwhile, in a separate location, Laura discusses recent events with a man, asking for his opinion. She explains that Mr. Huang and Jin-Woo are linked by a single incident, and there is a possibility that Jin-Woo was responsible for Huang's brother's death, fueling his desire for revenge. The man contemplates this and remarks that, given everything that has happened, meeting Jin-Woo will now be even more difficult. He expresses disappointment as he had been looking forward to encountering him in person. This man is none other than Thomas Andre, a national-level hunter and the guild master of the Scavenger Guild. When Laura asks what he intends to do if Jin-Woo and Huang end up in conflict, he responds coldly. Huang, he declares, is the property of the Scavenger Guild, and the guild itself belongs to him. No one, not even the government of the United States, will be forgiven for interfering with what is his. His grip tightens around the TV remote in his hand, crushing it effortlessly. On the third night of the Jeju Island raid, soldiers and hunters from the Night Guild, the leading guild in the Yeongnam region, arrive on the island. Their primary task is to collect essence stones while remaining on standby in case of further incidents. Amidst their operations, Jong-soo sighs heavily before recalling the story of an unfortunate man. This man had always strived to be the best in his field, dedicating his life to achieving greatness. His ultimate dream was to become an Olympic gold medalist, and to that end, he subjected himself to relentless training, strict diets, and grueling practice sessions. Everything had been perfectly set for him. He passed the doping tests, experienced a promising dream the night before, and was in peak condition. However, fate had other plans. A routine manometer evaluation revealed that he had awakened as a hunter, rendering him ineligible to compete in the Olympics, and he starts crying. Yoon-tae asks if he is talking about himself. He continues that with his lifelong goal shattered in an instant, he was forced to abandon the dream he had worked so hard for. Yet rather than succumb to despair, he resolved to forge a new path. Instead of an Olympic victory, he set his sights on creating the greatest guild the country had ever seen. The anime may be ending, but the journey isn't over. I'll continue uploading arcs of solo leveling per week, so make sure to subscribe and be the first to watch. As he recounts the tale, a fellow guild member reminds him not to litter, while Yoon-tae, moved by his perseverance, calls him an inspiration. Jong-soo presents a collection of top-quality essence stones, believing that with these, his dream of creating the country's greatest guild will finally come to fruition. However, he is quickly reminded that taking them would constitute embezzlement. Brushing off the concern, he remarks that the area has been completely cleared and that he can no longer sense any traces of mana, suggesting that it would be fine to relax. Just as he finishes speaking, an ant suddenly appears. Without hesitation, he swiftly eliminates it before reassuring the soldiers not to be overly concerned. Only a handful of weak ants remain, and that is precisely why they are stationed here, to protect them. At that moment, Yoon-tae notices something unusual and immediately alerts Jong-soo. The soldiers, caught off guard, demand to know who is there. Before they can react further, a massive figure emerges from the darkness. This imposing presence is none other than Rakan, the Monarch of Fangs. Jong-soo quickly assesses the situation, noting that the only individuals meant to be present are the assigned soldiers and the association agents overseeing the mission. He questions the intruder's identity, while Yoon-tae, filled with unease, wonders if this being is even human. She advises against opening fire, as the entity before them is not a magic beast. The soldiers, still on edge, warn that they will shoot if he does not comply with their orders. However, Rakan, visibly irritated, speaks in an unfamiliar language, shocking Jong-soo. The words he utters belong to the language of the beasts. Before anyone can react further, another figure steps forward and casually snaps his fingers. In an instant, the soldiers and hunters lose consciousness, collapsing to the ground. Rakan, displeased, questions the icy newcomer about his actions. This man is Silad, the Monarch of Frost, who calmly explains that there is no need to cause unnecessary commotion. He has merely put them to sleep for the time being. Turning his attention back to the task at hand, Silad inquires if Rakan has confirmed what they were searching for. Rakan responds affirmatively, stating that it was indeed the power they suspected. However, Silad finds the situation perplexing. He cannot fathom why he would be aiding humans. Raken, uninterested in speculation, simply shrugs, remarking that if Sillad is so curious, he should ask the person in question himself. The individual they are referring to may very well be Ashbourne, the Shadow Monarch, or Jin-Woo. As the conversation continues, Raken takes in his surroundings, noting the overwhelming stench of decaying ants. He muses that if she were here to witness this sight, she would have been driven into a frenzy. Unbothered, Sillad dismisses any concerns, reaffirming that the hunt will proceed as scheduled and that nothing has changed. Raken acknowledges this without further protest. Sillad then conjures a portal, preparing to leave. Before stepping through, Raken comments that he senses the presence of one of them here. Sillad, intrigued, asks if he is certain that it is truly in South Korea. Raken then questions whether they should eliminate the target before departing, but Sillad refuses, stating that they should leave it in that person's hands. Raken, unimpressed, accuses Sillad of avoiding involvement. Sillad remains indifferent, remarking that Raken is free to interpret his decision however he pleases. With that, he vanishes through the portal. Watching him go, Raken scoffs, calling him a coward. He glances at the unconscious hunters, contemplating whether to take further action, but ultimately decides against making the situation more troublesome. With a slash, he opens his own portal and departs, leaving the scene behind. A large crowd of cameramen frantically captures photographs as Jin-Woo steps forward, dressed in a sharp suit with a flower in his hand. Ever since the Jeju Island raid concluded, it has remained the sole topic of conversation across the nation. Screens are flooded with comments discussing Jin-Woo's remarkable feat in clearing Jeju Island. During the raid, the public witnessed Jin-Woo in action for the first time since his ascent to S rank, marking his official debut on Jeju's battlefield. Observers speculate whether he should be classified as a national-level hunter, though opinions remain divided. Some hail his prowess, while others question the extent of his strength and wonder how he became so powerful. With the entire country deeply invested in the raid's outcome, discussions about Jin-Woo dominate public discourse. Though his actions receive widespread praise, he is not without criticism. Many argue that the loss of lives could have been reduced had he joined the raid earlier. While countless voices express unwavering support for him, few attempt to counter the criticisms leveled against him. Jin-Woo solemnly places the flower at Byung-gu's memorial, acknowledging the grim reality that casualties were unavoidable. His gaze lingers on the memorial, where mourners shed quiet tears. After a brief moment of reflection, he turns away and departs. As he passes Yunho, he leans in and whispers that he once firmly believed no single hero could end a war alone, yet recent events have begun to challenge that notion. He urges Jin-Woo to stand tall, assuring him that he was the one who finally put an end to this tragedy. Overcome with emotion, Yunho thanks him, his voice trembling as tears spill from his eyes. Nearby, Miss Cha catches sight of Jin-Woo. As their eyes meet, a sudden blush spreads across her cheeks, and she quickly averts her gaze. Jin-Woo, perplexed by her reaction, glances at her before shifting his attention back to the memorial. A total of 4,801 hunters participated in the 5th Jeju Island raid, accompanied by 727 awakened civilians called to arms. The battle claimed the lives of 64 awakened individuals and 32 civilians. Although the death toll remained grim, this final assault resulted in significantly fewer casualties than any of the previous attempts. Later, Jin-Woo sits at a table with Gun-hee, who inquires whether he truly intends to establish his own guild. He reveals that certified S-rank hunters are exempt from acquiring a guildmaster's license. All Jin-Woo needs to do is make a simple phone call to the association, and they will handle the rest. Jin-Woo acknowledges this and silently resolves to investigate what benefits he can leverage as an S-rank hunter. Gun-hee then questions whether Jin-Woo had cast some kind of barrier over Jeju Island. Jin-Woo, taken aback, expresses his confusion. Gun-hee elaborates that hunters and soldiers had been dispatched to clear the island and collect essence stones, but inexplicably, all of them lost consciousness. Even the A-rank and B-rank hunters, along with members of the esteemed Night Guild, were rendered unconscious. He wonders if Jin-Woo had unknowingly set up a barrier. Jin-Woo, still puzzled, denies any involvement but understands the implications. Curious, he asks what the affected hunters and soldiers reported. Gun-hee informs him that they recall nothing from the moments leading up to their collapse, leaving them uncertain as to whether they were subjected to a magic spell or some unknown force. Jin-Woo considers whether this phenomenon might have been a trap left behind by the ants. Just then, one of Gun-hee's guards approaches and quietly delivers a message. Gun-hee rises from his seat, explaining that his guest has arrived earlier than expected. He expresses his gratitude for Jin-Woo's time before taking his leave. Jin-Woo dismisses the thanks and contemplates returning home as well.